Welcome to Better Bedtime Chronicles. You're listening to Nicole
and Bridget. Together, we have 15 years experience working directly with families struggling with sleep challenges.
We share stories, advice, and deep dives into all things sleep. Let's go.
Nicole, it's
Hello.
been a hot minute.
It has been a bit, but I'm happy we're back.
Me too. As you guys know, this is our happy place, and we've been just so busy, I think, with work and personal things.
Yeah, podcast is always the first to go, but that's okay.
Sadly. And then it's like the thing we're most excited about, which is
Yeah.
great. So I'm so glad we're back here today.
Me too.
Yeah.
How's everything going? How have you been?
It's been a very so it's now June. May was insanely busy with work and just I don't know what it was in the air, getting everyone sleeping well. So it's just been busy with work. And you?
Yeah, we're just, the whole end of school wrap up, all the parties and field trips and things to think about and remember as a parent. And
yeah. And like every week it's like, oh, here's this theme day, this to do.
Fill out this form.
Yeah.
Bring this money to this place.
A lot of monies, a lot of forms, signing and whatnot. So it's nice when the kids get older. Like with my oldest son, you can just text and say he's allowed to do this.
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
then he'll just show them his phone, which is crazy. I know. What a world. What a world. It's very exciting.
Perfect, actually.
It is very exciting. And so we hit 20 episodes, our last episode with Tanya Heineman, which was fantastic. So if you haven't listened to that yet, really great if you're a breastfeeding parent or are going to be again or for the first time. Today, we're going to talk about something so applicable probably to every single one of you. I'm thinking it's often the thorn in our side when we get nights under control, and that is...
Naps.
Dun, dun, dun. The big questions. So we're going to go over the few kind of key questions I think that many of you wonder about, certainly the things we hear a lot about. And you might remember too, and if you haven't checked out our like age specific episodes early on with our foundations that we set, you can get like babies in the 4-month realm and the 6-month realm, etc. So go ahead and look there if you want more age specific. We're going to really go kind of broad here about like, why do short naps happen? Why are they always 31 minutes? Why are they refusing a nap or having a nap strike? So we'll go over some of those things today.
Perfect. Sounds great. Let's do it.
Okay. Do you want to maybe start with like, what do you think your number one complaint is in the nap arena?
Short naps.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Every single parent ever has dealt with short naps, right?
Yeah.
That's fair to say, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's like, why? It's like they're clearly not rested enough. Why are they refusing to go back down? Yeah.
Yeah. And short naps are always often very specific, especially after the 4-month mark. Like we will have people calling and saying very specifically, if they're watching that camera and they see those eyes pop open at exactly 36 minutes, there's a reason for that. This very specific short nap length. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I think it's one sleep cycle is where we're at. And so and in the night, it might be different, right? And there's a higher sleep pressure, a lengthier stretch there. But during the day, you might be able to set your watch to the exact number of minutes that your little one naps. And what's happening is they go through one sleep cycle, they're coming to the surface, and then often we're game over by that point.
They're struggling to connect their sleep cycles or fall back asleep at the end of their first sleep cycle. And then they wake and they're tired and they're crabby and they cry.
Yeah.
And we're like, go back to bed. And they say, we can't.
Yeah, that we can't. And then you're dealing with maybe a little overtired, a fussier wake window. Or I think the biggest wrench of all, and I think this is a mental game, is like you were trying to predict your day layout and how your day was going to be spread. And now this short nap has screwed you up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a source of anxiety for parents, for sure.
Yeah.
Or you also, like, we'll often hear this too. Parents call and they say, I take 45 minutes to get my kid to sleep.
Yes.
They finally fall asleep and 36 minutes later they're awake. And I feel like all I do all day is either try to get my kids to sleep, like have 20 minutes of peace, or listen to them crabby and tired because they haven't had enough sleep after a short nap.
Yes.
And so they're exhausted, right? Because they're just stuck in this cycle.
That's so, you know what, you're so right about that. The like energy and effort it takes to get not even a decent length nap.
Yeah, you'll spend more time trying to get your baby to sleep than they actually sleep.
Yeah. If that's you, you're in the right place. You're in the right place. We're going to talk about it all today. And I think just out the gate, the easiest opportunity is the sleeping environment that they're in.
Absolutely.
And you probably have heard all this, right? You want a dark room, some white noise, a little bit of background noise going on. I'm just going to take this moment to just stretch on the white noise piece. Should be at like 7 feet away from your kid, so not super close and not too loud, but having some background noise.
People ask me this a lot. So
Yes.
how loud? And my newest answer is as loud as a shower running in the room.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, because that's a safe volume.
Yeah, because I think, and I remember years ago it was turn it up. It's not loud enough. And that was always kind of the theme around white noise. But like whenever I go to a house, I almost always have to turn it down. There's the odd house I turn it up. But it should be like if you had a decibel reader, which I never did, but maybe you have one, or there's an app on your phone. It's like 40 to 50, I think is the max.
Lots, and now it's easy to get an app on your phone for decibel readers. But
the showers are great, smooth, like pretty straightforward. So just think about that, the noise or the darkness in the room, and then the attire that they're in. Are we sure they're warm enough or cool enough as it gets to be summer months? And so the reason we look at these environmental factors is because of this whole idea. They're waking up at 32 minutes or 36 minutes, whatever. And so what in that space could be stopping them from falling back asleep? And so those kind of things can look. And then on that note too, I think what was happening during their wake window, like were they fed enough, right? Or close enough to nap that they're not waking due to hunger? Those are kind of the easier things, I think, to check off the list.
Yeah, that's where we'd start. We'd look at all of those pieces. And then the next kind of most obvious one that you'll hear about a million times is, they want to, when they wake up from a short nap, if they're in a different environment or if their environment isn't the same as it was when they were falling asleep, they can often become disoriented by that. So like if they fall asleep bouncing or rocking in parents' arms and all of a sudden they wake up in their crib and they're like, where'd parent go? Or nursing to sleep or whatever. So that's where we start to look at and be curious about, how's babe falling asleep? Often families will call us and say things like, if we're doing a contact nap, the contact nap could be a couple hours long, but they only ever nap short in their crib. That's probably the reason for that, right? Because they're waking up in an environment that's different than the one they fell asleep in.
Yeah. And I think like it's easy to brush that off, but truly, like imagine you fell asleep in one room and woke up somewhere else. Like that's jarring.
Very
and for a baby, like that's really like, what's happening? So I think it's only fair to go and offer that same support to try to extend the nap if you can. But yeah, the way they fall asleep is really what we're looking at here. So if we think about environmental factors, we're in tip-top shape. We know the room's in good shape. We know that they're in good attire. We know all their physical needs are met, right? They've had maybe some tummy time or some outdoor time, babied around a bit depending on how old they are, right? And they've had adequate feedings. And I say this out of love because sometimes if we're so hyper-focused on sleep, especially if your baby's young, under 9 months, and they're having plenty of naps, we're so focused on sleep. I've seen people literally forget to offer a feed during the wake window. So I'm really going to take this chance to share that with you. And so making sure all needs are met. But Nicole has a good point too. I think the heart of it really is, how are they falling asleep? Do they have the capacity to fall back asleep without intervention from the parent?
Another important point here, this is something I often have to talk to families about when they call, is sometimes short naps are okay, especially when babies are younger. So it's actually exceptionally common for babies, under 6-7 months old to have only short naps. And it's not a concern from a developmental perspective. So sometimes it can be a concern because it's stressful for the parents or because it's hard to manage. But the reality is if you have a 5-month-old and the 5-month-old is taking like 4 short 30-minute naps a day, there's nothing developmentally concerning about that. And it may be that we just need to wait a little bit longer before those naps lengthen. Again, assuming we've checked all those other boxes we just discussed. So it's also important to consider like what's developmentally appropriate and okay. And my middle kid, she was like a chronic short napper until 7 months old. She only took short naps. She was my second, so I couldn't offer her contact naps because I had a 1.5-year-old at home when she was born. And so she just had short naps all day and she was of course fine and that was not a problem for her. But other families want to work on short naps more quickly and they're not content to let it develop naturally. And that's cool too. There are some like strategies that we can use to help, namely lots of the stuff that Bridget and I were just chatting about. But it is also sometimes okay to have short naps. So make sure you're assessing if your kids are having like developmentally appropriate short naps.
Yeah, good. I'm so glad you mentioned that. And I'll sometimes get calls. People will say, you know what, we're actually sleeping great at night, but we're 5 months old and the naps are all short. And like once you talk it through, you're like, you're actually doing beautifully. And the short naps are super normal. And I do think it definitely comes with time. And we're not the type to say, enjoy them while they're young. Just deal with it for now. It'll come later. But like truly after that 6-7 month mark, you should see the capacity to have lengthier naps, especially if you have those few ducks in a row.
Yeah.
But I think like many of the things we talk about, your lens on it, like the perspective you have on it and your reaction to the short nap can really change your entire like outlook on how your days go with your baby. So instead of like, okay, they woke up at X, now this nap's going to happen here, next nap's going to happen here, and then you fall short of that, or it feels like you're falling short of that because they inevitably have a short nap. Or of course, the day you want the short nap to work to your advantage, they're going to sleep as long as they want that day, right? You might have had that feeling. So instead, like letting go of that control of like, we can't control how long it takes them to fall asleep. We certainly can't control their length of sleep. You can control your perspective. You can control your response. And that's really where your power lies, I think.
Yep, I agree.
And whether or not you're sleep training, and depending on how old your little one is, I'm a fan of if it's under an hour, you try to coax them back if they'll allow it. If they're content in their babying around, like they could motor around for 20 minutes and dip back into sleep. Oftentimes we're rushing in too soon, intervening too soon. But on the flip side, let's say they wake up before 1 hour and they're crying, they're upset, and this is usually what we hear, is it is okay to go in and coax them back to sleep with that careful touch and response that you have.
I think the point about how they wake up is really important. So like if they're waking happy versus if they're waking crying, we can learn a lot of information about how that baby's managing based on how they wake. So if your baby's chronically waking, crying and upset, there's a good chance that they're not getting enough sleep, right? Like that's often a sign of them being tired or overtired, you know, versus some other babies who are kind of like on a good wake time and are on a decent sleep schedule, getting enough sleep, still only sleeping short naps, but waking happy and content. We would have different responses for those two babes. So
yeah. And even like which nap of the day, were they like that one time, were they like that a different time, and just basing your response on what they're up to.
And we're always looking for patterns. That's such a good point, because if you have a generally happy baby who wakes happy most of the time but randomly wakes crying, then that's not a reason to worry.
To pivot or anything. Yeah.
We want to look for like consistent patterns over weeks rather than like once or twice happenings.
That's a perfect segue into like what age has what number of naps and when do they transition. And I think what you said is spot on. If one day they're fighting that last nap, it doesn't mean we're all of a sudden going to drop that nap. We want to see that like a good, let's say 4 or 5 days a week for a couple weeks before we make the leap. And so let's ask this question then. How many naps should my baby take each day? Maybe starting in the newborn realm. What do you think?
So newborns can take as many naps as they want. Sometimes a newborn will take like 3 5-hour naps. Sometimes they'll take 20 5-minute naps. All of that is normal. There's nothing that's like standard in newborn world. And so as long as what I say about newborns is as long as your baby isn't awake for too long at any given point, their awake times are nice and tight, then you're fine. Then everything else is golden. So newborns, completely unpredictable, no standards, and no expectations is probably best case scenario.
I love that. And you said to me years ago, like, I think you had it written somewhere, is like the how often matters more than the how in that 4th trimester, that newborn period. And then what about 4 to 6 months?
So 4 to 6 months, we're typically seeing anywhere between 3 to 4 naps would be the most common. We want like kind of a 3 nap schedule to roughly establish by around 6 months. But yeah, it's not at all uncommon for babies of that age to be taking 4 or even 5 naps, especially if they're short. So if a parent calls and they've got, you know, a 4-month-old taking 4 or 5 30-minute naps a day, then that would be developmentally appropriate and normal. And even if a 6-month-old is still on 4 short naps, that would be normal and appropriate. Again, we're looking more at awake times between 4 and 6 months. We're somewhere between an hour and a half to 2.5 hours of awake time. And that's more important than how many naps they're having or how long they are. But of course, as they age, like the difference between 4 and 6 months is huge, and a lot of sleep changes happen during that period. And so it is common to start seeing a 3-nap schedule emerge towards 6 months.
Yeah, I agree completely. And then once we get that 6th, 7th into the 8th month, we usually see dropping down to 2 typically, especially if they're lengthy. And that's what we hope to get. So even when we work with a family that's in one of those transition ages, right? Like maybe 6 months, I always have it on my list to say like, okay, maybe we're seeing 3 right now, but we should in the next few weeks be seeing 2, assuming that everything's going nice and smoothly. And then the big question is, when do we go to 1 nap?
Yeah, great question. I would say the average age is roughly 15 months, and it's anywhere between like 12 and 18
I'd
roughly
say so.
months.
And I find childcare can play a role there.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too. Babies in childcare typically transition earlier because they have peers who are slightly older than them who are on one nap, and they get FOMO.
They totally get FOMO. And then centers especially too are like, they have certain rules they have to follow with when nap is offered and when their ratios change for breaks and things like that. So they'll often encourage going down to one nap as soon as they begin, which is often 12 months.
Yeah.
And so we'll get some
In Ontario.
Yes. So it's like, well, what do I do? They've napped hard twice a day this whole time. And all of a sudden they're only going to be offered the one. And so if that's you, you're not alone, number one, but you might adjust bedtime to accommodate. And I also think, especially if it's just for a little while, if they're wiped on the weekends, it's okay to offer two on the weekends.
Yeah, for sure. That's a nice transition strategy. And we talk about that at length in our, I think it's 12 to 18 month episodes. So check that out if that's you right now.
Yeah, because it's specific. Yeah, there's some specific, I think, challenges there, but things you can do to just accommodate that season that you're in. But yeah, I would agree. I think 12 months up to 18 months. We like to go baby led. And to me, the most deceiving thing is they always go down for any nap transition. They're still going down hard in the morning. So how the hell could we ever drop a nap when they can barely make it through the wake window of the first one? So deceiving.
Common thing that parents say. No chance we're going to one nap. They can't make it to 9 a.m.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, actually, you might be surprised.
Yeah. And so let's talk about some indicators of like, okay, we're approaching a nap transition. So let's say we're sleeping smooth, whether it's short naps, long naps, whatever, and we're on a steady schedule. All of a sudden,
yeah, what do we see? So as we approach nap transitions, you might see that it's harder to get your baby down for a nap when they previously would go down pretty easily. Signs that their awake windows are maybe stretching a little bit. You might see naps shorten. So if you previously had long naps and they all of a sudden start getting really short, maybe the wake window wasn't long enough to create enough sleep pressure. You might also see bedtime becoming more of a challenge. They're just maybe too well rested and they start to struggle at bedtime, have more night wakings or wake early in the morning. So they're just trying to accommodate, the extra sleep that they're getting during the day sometime in their night.
Yes.
What else? What am I missing?
That's perfect, I think. And then on the note of night waking, especially a lengthy night waking, and kind of thinking about this, like I like to always envision like a 24-hour clock, or like there's a vision of 24 hours and they only need X hours within 24. And from newbornhood up through all the months, that changes and we adjust with how often they nap or when is bedtime. But certain things can appear like that when it's maybe not ready for a nap. So for example, learning a new skill, they're suddenly standing or making a new noise or hopping in their crib, whatever it might be. And you're like, okay, well, they're resisting this second nap, let's say, or bedtime because they're taking longer than usual to fall asleep because they're practicing this skill, or maybe they're even like upset a bit, or they're just like whatever they're up to in there.
Yeah.
So learning a new skill, going through some teething pain, or even just having a 5-minute nap on the way home from daycare in the car, like those sorts of things can appear like we need a transition. That's why we say a good few days a week for a couple weeks, we're seeing it. Okay, now it's time to jump ships.
Yeah. If someone emails me and says like the last 3 days, something's been happening, I'll always say, give it another week. And if it's still happening, then we'll talk about nap transitions. But right now, it's probably illness, teething, developmental milestone, some other sleep disruptor that will kind of like get back on track if you just do nothing.
I love that. And just giving it time to really see, because I find we jump too quick. Really just fast on to the next one. Nope, let's just wait. And then we make the adjustment. Because if you go too soon, you have to roll it back. And that's just stressful for everybody. Hard to deal with. So, and then what about when do we drop nap forever? All of it. Sad day. Well, some people like it. I think I find it like, oh God.
It's funny because with my first, I dreaded no naps. I was terrified. I was like, how am I going to fill 12 straight hours without a break? Especially because I had, two, babies. I think, babies at that time.
Yes.
By my third, I'm like, I can't wait to get rid of this nap because I have 2 older kids who are doing stuff and nap gets in the way. So it's all about your perspective on that one. Age range totally varies. Ideally, we want to see it till age 3, but some drop prior to age 3, and some keep it all the way up to 4 or 4.5 when they start kindy.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the youngest I've seen, and it's so rare, is like just over 2, which is like almost never.
Yep.
But same idea, they'd be like sleeping beautifully, and all of a sudden we're laying in bed for 90 minutes before falling asleep, or we're starting the day at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And so you're faced with the choice of like, do I continue offering nap and accept a much later bedtime? Or do we drop the nap and bring bedtime much earlier? And I think a lot of kids can be not to bounce back and forth between the two. Certainly I would lean into one or the other, but like I find oftentimes you can
could
make
do
that
either.
choice. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Depending on your dynamic at home and like what works out well for you. Some people really deeply struggle with the early bedtime and not having the flexibility to be out on a path, especially this time of year, like doing stuff. And so they might like that better. Right.
Well, I'm thinking of my own, like last year, Finn was still napping, my youngest, but we would do evening activities with the kid, like the older kids in the summer. So I was happy for him to nap because he could go to bed at 9 o'clock at night. It'd be no problem.
Right.
Whereas this year, like we're approaching kindy, so he can't, like we're trying to train him out of his nap.
Yeah.
And so now he has to be in bed like pretty promptly and earlier because he's not napping, and it's getting in the way of our evening plans.
Yeah, I bet.
So we're dividing and conquering this summer. And then if we do have, like we did our special fireworks that we always do in our neighborhood a few weeks ago. And so on that day, we gave him a nap so he could stay up late.
But he managed beautifully. Nicole and her partner, they do neighborhood fireworks, which is really nice. So
it's a fun time.
It's a very fun time. So it can be later. And for those kindy parents listening, or you're approaching kindy, I think sometimes as they're adjusting, especially if you're doing full day every day, kindergarten is like they might need a little pocket on the weekend of at least quiet time to see how they do, especially as they adjust. One of our clients who's become a lovely friend who we see was just sharing with me, because they do every other day school. The other days she naps, and that helps her kind of stay at her best. Great. And that's, well over age 4. So I think that's awesome. I think it depends on the kid really. And their temperament's an ultimate indicator really.
It's also really common, especially even like for kiddos who have dropped their nap pre-kindy, when they begin kindy, they often need like an earlier bedtime, even if they're not going through a nap transition at the start of kindy, because kindy is just like a whole new world for them, all new stimulation, big learning, big changes. And so all of my children, when they started kindy, they ended up in bed by like 6:15 for a month or two just to adjust, and they needed it. They were exhausted. So
it's so draining for them. So don't be afraid of bringing that bed. And often it feels like you get home, your dinner, your bath, your bed, and it's like, what just happened? And you're back to like almost toddler years when they go to bed so early. Yes.
But it won't be like that forever.
No, they'll adjust. And I forget who gave me this advice about activities too. Like when you're starting school in the fall, is like not overloading with extracurricular activities, because like school just absolutely drains them, and we want to make sure they can have that nice early bedtime. So I think just in a nutshell with the nap transitions, we're looking in the 6, 7, 8 month realm, like, to go down to 2, and then somewhere from 12 to 18 to go down for the 1 nap. I'm going to swing in a different question here. Maybe I'll ask you, Nicole, and you can see what you think. Is it safe for my baby to nap in a car seat, swing, carrier?
Oh, okay. Here we go. Car seat, yes. Car seats are designed for nap safety. However, they have to be supervised while they're sleeping in a car seat. So, first things first, keep an eye on them, of course. Also, I think there's a timeline, like they shouldn't do it for more than 4 hours or something like that. So overnight sleeping is not ideal in a car seat. Of course, there are the occasional, like someone once asked me, like, okay, I have an 8-hour drive to my parents' house, like, and I just said, take a break, get them, drive a bit, take them out to feed them, change their bum, right? Like you're going to do that anyway. They're not going to go 8 hours without eating. So, just let them move their bodies a little bit. But yes, car seats are safe to sleep in. Do you want to field carriers?
Yeah. And I think too, for the car seats, the reason with the supervision especially is like the way they're foldy almost. Like if you can I'm trying to do it like you can see and you can't, but like their chins are down to the chest. And so that we really want to make sure they're keeping an eye there. And the carriers too, and this I would say similar for the swing, is a great tool as long as you're keeping an eye. The carrier is a good segue into like, can I do contact naps? I think the carrier is an absolute godsend for napping or extending naps, especially if you have multiple kids or you just don't want to put them down, or they are really seemingly needing that closeness to you, but you need your hands free. And I had this question asked at a conference I was at last week for doulas, was like, can I use another device in this realm, the Joey Band, like this thing that you can kind of tie your baby onto.
Yeah, it's like a wrap sort of.
Yeah, it's like a variation of a wrap. And then can I lay down and sleep? So I would say no. Where are you at with that?
I agree. No,
Yeah, I
that's
said
not
no.
safe. There is safe co-sleeping options, but the baby has to be loose when you're safely co-sleeping. So certainly baby should not be strapped to you for co-sleeping.
I agree completely. Whether it be for nap or whatever, I think if you're awake and aware, fine. But otherwise, I wouldn't. And on the note of contact napping too, and I think too, like the sleep training, sleep consulting, all these worlds and this information out there, like there's nothing wrong with a contact nap if it's serving you well.
Absolutely. In fact, we encourage it, especially with the younger babes.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to be rigid and intense on all sleep to the point that you drive yourself nuts.
No.
I think this is to your credit with the how often matters is like, okay, they need a nap and you want them in the crib, sure, but they're maybe more clingy or they're teething or you need to have your arms free and you can't bounce them any longer. Let's say you put them in a wrap and that's totally fine. There's no problem with that at all.
We're advocates for the carrier. I loved, like when my babes were little, I would use a sling wrap, like with the ring sling. And those were great because I could breastfeed in them. They could sleep, like they lived in those.
Yeah.
And then as they get a bit older, like the more like ergo baby structure ones, I really like. Even my almost 4-year-old, he'll still go in that one.
Yeah, he loves that.
So yeah, I'm a big carrier advocate.
They are nice. And the ring sling I only caught onto with my third baby, but my toddler was 22 months. So he ended up in it actually more. But there's a maker in Guelph called So Funky, SEW, and she would make really cool ones. So I got one from her and it was like a really great fabric, breathable fabric. So I'm just a hot person. I run hot, and having a baby on you in the summer, especially like a toddler who's 30 pounds, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I think that was great. So yeah, we're big fans of doing that as well. So I'm going to throw another question your way, Cole, is why does my baby fight naps even if they're tired?
That we wouldn't have a job if that wasn't true. I know.
Why do they do this? I wish I could have a nap.
Okay, there's actually a scientific reason. It's cortisol. So when any human being is trying to stay awake longer than we should. I'm using air quotes. Should is kind of like a relative term here, but our body produces a stress hormone called cortisol, which helps us stay awake. And so, I often explain, like, when you like go to a concert and you're up past your bedtime and you're partying and you get a bit of a slump at like that 9:30 mark. And then all of a sudden you get your second wind and you're like, oh, I could stay up till 3 a.m. I've got all this energy. That's cortisol. That's cortisol helping you stay awake. That's the second wind. Well, our babies get that. And because they need sleep so frequently and so often, their body is constantly, all of our bodies are constantly producing cortisol, but their bodies are constantly producing cortisol that's keeping them awake and alert. And the longer a baby stays awake when they should be sleeping, again, air quotes here, the more cortisol they're producing, and therefore they're staying awake longer. That cortisol makes it hard for them to fall asleep. And so then they begin fighting sleep and that's when we describe that they're overtired, they're exhausted. We can tell they're tired, but they won't go to bed. That's that cortisol that's making it really challenging for them to fall asleep. And so that's why we're so obsessed with wake windows. That's why we care so much about how long our babies are awake for, because we really don't want them to overproduce cortisol, which will create a lot of sleep barriers. So oftentimes if I'm working with a newborn family and they're complaining that their overtired, exhausted baby will never fall asleep, they can't be rocked, they can't be nursed, there's nothing they can do to get this baby to fall asleep, right away I'm like, shorten those awake times. The baby's awake too long. After an hour with a newborn, get up into a dark room and start bouncing. You'll be shocked, but that baby will pass right out. Right? Not always. I mean, there's probably other reasons, factors, but in general, that's a really common cause of that overtired, exhausted crying.
That is so beautifully put. I was going to call it they get cranked up, but that's way more scientific.
That's true too.
Yeah. It basically, and then they fight it and it's harder. And that's like, we always preach from the early tired cues are the way to go, because once you reach those late ones, they're exhausted, they're crying, they're upset. Of course, we still have to get them to bed. Is just trying to kind of catch them early enough so that we can be in good shape there.
What if we don't catch them early? What do we do? How do we manage that?
I mean, I still think we got to go for it. And maybe it's extra, right? It's like, okay, I'm really going to have to pull out all the stops here. And really, I think, and we're always here for the parents, right? It's like, we're here, people call for their kids, but like, we're really working with the parents. Just like, ease up on yourself. Like, okay, it's all right. Don't get mad at yourself. life happens, you know, for whatever reason, nap didn't happen in the ideal timing. Like, let's move on from that. We're not going to be frustrated with ourselves or our partner if they missed it, or grandma, or whoever. And still, you just consistently pull out the stops. And by that, I mean, let's say they do well with motion and a soother. It's like, you're not going to do that for 5 seconds and then switch to something else. Is like, really see it through.
Yeah, yeah.
And take the time, and don't be afraid to lean on other ways, right? Maybe this is a walk.
Yeah.
Or, you know what, I meant to go grab a coffee out. I'm going to put them in the car and off we go.
Yep. Car is a great solution to an overtired baby.
I think so.
Yeah.
Moving, motion, if you have that option, or a walk or something, I think is just a key backup plan. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a good point to talk about, or a good space to talk about co-regulation too, because another piece of this. So if your baby's crying and you can tell they're tired and they're 3 hours past their awake time and etc., and you're becoming stressed and you're becoming frustrated and you're trying to get them to sleep and nothing you're doing is working, like your cortisol is then also peaked, right? Yeah. So as the parent of the baby who's struggling to sleep, like your stress hormones are responding to this. And so you get stuck in this cycle where like you're stressed and they're stressed and then they're responding to your stress and everybody's elevated. And that is never going to be an environment for sleep. And so if I ever see that kind of dynamic happening or that cycle happening, I'll say, okay, we got to pull this back to basics. Stop, like forcing this situation to happen. Calm your own body, calm your baby's body. This is where, like, if they're younger, like skin to skin is a great option. That allows you to co-regulate, like sing some songs, just do some breathing exercises. And I always tell this story, but this is one of my favorite examples of this. And one time my oldest had been awake for hours. I could not get her to sleep. I knew she was tired. I was freaking out. I was certainly postpartum depression struggling. I'm crying. She's crying. Everybody's crying. And I'm sitting on the floor. I can visualize it so well today. I'm sitting on the floor of my room and I just called my husband because I was like, I need to just like get out of this cycle I'm stuck in. And I'm just like talking to him on the phone and I'm just crying and telling him how hard this is. And I'm so tired. And he's like, okay, I'm going to come home. But of course he's half an hour away. And as we're chatting, I just look down and she's fucking asleep. She fell asleep in my arms. And what happened there is I was so stressed. She was feeling my stress. She couldn't regulate. She was exhausted. We were both full of cortisol. And then I spoke to my husband who listened to me and validated me and helped calm me down and told me he was coming. And I relaxed. Amazing. And then she relaxed and then she fell asleep. So that's another piece of this is just like watch how your stress is. Yeah. Share the load with a partner or a supportive person if you can, and co-regulate because how you feel is also how your baby feels. They're very attuned to your stress levels.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that wild? And that's kind of, I think, a role we take very seriously is like helping you not only carry that, shoulder it with you, but give you real techniques on how to overcome this too. Oh my gosh, I can just like feel that stress. And I think too, and a client said this to me about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago but then being told that was activating for her.
Sure.
Well, now I have to not be stressed.
Yes, that's such a good point.
But I'm like, but it's true though. And she's like, I get it. But it's like, okay, then give yourself permission to walk away for a few minutes. Give yourself permission to authentically call your trusted person or who, and like, someone safe that you can say your things to.
Yeah.
Like, because your job as a co-regulator is so important. Like to make that a priority. And like, we all have our moments, don't get me wrong. But like, if that's a cycle you're in, I think that's a very good point.
I remember my midwife said to me once, a baby can't fall off the floor. And what she meant is if you're freaking the fuck out and you need a break, put your baby on the floor. Yeah. They're going to be okay.
Yes, they are.
And you can walk away and take that breath that you need.
Yeah.
And that was like, that's meaningful advice. That's something that has stuck with me since, for the last 10 years, right?
Yeah. They're going to be okay. They're going to be okay. We don't have to jump the second they make a noise. Give them that few minutes. For us, we lived in an apartment at the time when our oldest was a baby, and I'd go out on the balcony, just look out into the stars and be like, Christ. Jeez,
it's okay to take a break. It's okay to prioritize your mental health. It will improve the quality of your baby's lived experience.
Yes.
If you calm your own body first.
Yeah. It's like what you said. The number one indicator of, was it the outcome, something about outcome is the mom's happiness
childhood
level.
outcome, best outcomes associated most directly with parent mother particularly, happiness.
Amazing. It's worth it. And if we put ourselves at the bottom of the list often, but like if for no one else, it's for them too, but for you as well, we're after you for sure.
Yeah.
This is all, I think, really good info that our, hopefully our listeners, or you're listening and you really are finding some good answers here. If there's something we're missing or you have a question about, you can write in the comments and we see that.
Yeah.
You can also write me anytime at sleep@betterbedtime.ca if you have questions. I think to end, unless there's something else you want to add, Nicole, is if someone is like, how can, if I have zero structure around naps, how can I establish some kind of nap schedule for my baby?
Great question. I would suggest starting with awake times. I would Google my baby's 5 months. What is a good awake time? And Google will give you some advice. And then just kind of pay attention. That's the best strategy. Just pay attention to how long they've been awake. And if they get close to the time that their awake time should be for their age and stage, darken the room, go to a quiet place, just do some, calming music or white noise, co-regulate, do a little bouncing.
I like it.
And just set them up for success that way.
Yeah, I like that. And then you'll notice Nicole didn't say any time, because it's really, the rigid schedule is not a friend to you when you are in the zone of trying to establish any kind of, even if like there will be a point where they're going to land at steady nap timing. Like that, you will get there. But you don't start there. You start with the wake windows. You start with looking at their environment and how they're falling asleep. We do have a nap guide as well on our website. You're welcome to check that out as well. This, I think, has been a very quickly intense into the naps because we figured it was time to really talk these naps through specifically. So don't be a stranger. Reach out anytime. Is there anything else you want to add, Nicole?
No, I think that's it. Quick and dirty naps.
Quick and dirty. It impacts us all. And thank you again for being patient with us and listening to us. And we'll have some other exciting stuff coming your way soon. Have a great week.
Goodbye. Thanks for listening. Just remember, this shit is hard, but you are killing it.
To stay in touch, you can find us at betterbedtime.ca.